the first thing we kind of need to establish is there's no one way to do this. There's no recipe that says A, B, C, D, follows these instructions, and here's what you get. Because every single image, because it's generative, every single one's different. And every single one is going to offer different ways to bring out, the lush beauty which is sitting there waiting to be discovered. And the game's afoot, originally by Shakespeare, but when Conan Arthur Doyle wrote about Sherlock Holmes saying that to Watson, this was about investigating and trying to solve mysteries, and that's what we're doing here. So now, back to Photoshop. Let me show you quickly that in this one, see how faint everything is? And I don't know how clearly this is all popping up on the screen, but the idea that starting out with something that is more subtle sometimes works to your advantage. I wanted that because I wanted to try something different. Here is a 1 pixel, and if I click on this, a 1 pixel selection that I've stretched out and changed to darken. If I come up to normal, you're going to see it's a bunch of lines, a bunch of vertical lines. And I'll show you how that was done. And this next one is a 1 pixel selection, again to darken, that is just horizontal lines. What's that about, and why did I do it? Now, the reason is because then when I took it into Camera Raw, you notice we have some of these horizontal lines which go from side to side, and some of the verticals which are going from top to bottom. That was an extra bit of geometry I wanted to introduce, and we get some really interesting effects in different places. The find edges, I don't always do this. I don't do it very often. But here I wanted to pull out some geometry for this next step. And this next step, if I turn this on, this is the Generate Normal Map, and it's up here in Filter 3D right there. And I've found that this gives some interesting 3D effects. This one right here, I'm looking at this, and this is confusing and not working well at all. Not like some of the other ones. If you scroll down, you'll see some of the 3D imagery that really worked well. I did those without the find edges and without these two 1 pixel selections. And then add motion blur both horizontally and vertically gave it more pronounced versions of the vertical and horizontal lines that were introduced here in these two layers. And then once again, try and find edges, but with a blending mode that didn't emphasize the edges, but kind of made them more subtle, kind of drowned out, if you look, kind of drowned out those really bright lines, because I wasn't all that interested in that. And then we've got some really hot colors working. They're oversaturated. Here's desaturation, working on individual channels, and then lowering the luminance of some colors as well. Again, another motion blur just to try to see what I could discover here. And then the Camera Raw to tone this back down. And this is the one I saved. And I thought this was subtle. I thought this was subtle. And posted it and said, whoa, look at this. And then I'll talk about this this set of actions. I made these actions. These are mine. And I will share this with you. But this, and depending upon which eyeball you click here, you get far different results. And, the idea that you can make this more subtle. People who make posters for movies use the lookup tables in order to find some color harmonies, with bringing everything into one kind of color mode. So the idea that here, what I thought was subtle now is far more so. And then added a radial blur and a blend mode that, I'm not sure I kept that. I think I turned that off when I saved the final image. I didn't particularly like this final one as much as this. So that's a walkthrough of the process for this guy, and we're going to come back and go ahead and try it here so I can show you how some of that additional geometry was made. And we won't follow the same steps after that because this image is different than the other one.